A huge popular solidarity march takes place in the Venezuelan capital on the sidelines of the Sao Paulo Forum. Opposition forces in Argentina condemn the government's subjugation to the International Monetary Fund. And Guyana finally selects a new Electoral Commission chairperson after the Caribbean Court of Justice demanded consensus between the government and the opposition. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. More than 150 left-wing social movements and political parties are meeting in the Venezuelan capital for the 25th Sao Paulo Forum. Today, the forum celebrates Women's Day, and a popular demonstration of solidarity between peoples has been held in Caracas. The groups have come together under the slogan of peace, sovereignty, and the prosperity of the people. The forum's objectives include peace in Colombia, supporting dialogue between the Venezuelan government and the opposition, and combating the persecution of political leaders by right-wing governments, such as former Brazilian President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva. Meanwhile, the president of the Venezuelan National Constituent Assembly, Diosdado Cabello, addressed a parliamentary meeting as part of the 2019 edition. He said that every time the peoples of the world are suffering, the Sao Paulo Forum must come out in their defense. Cabello added that imperialism won't beat the Venezuelan government.
We're grateful for your words of solidarity with the Bolivarian Revolution, and I agree that we have to turn words into action. Right now, we're members of Parliament, but we've all been part of left-wing political parties. We all come from the struggle. Some of us even inherited our ancestral struggles against the repression of our campesinos, our indigenous communities, and our working class. We've had a difficult task during this era of North American imperialism, directed by people that aren't rational enough to govern a country, and a country as powerful as the United States, least of all. For 20 years we've been fighting here in Venezuela. There hasn't been one day of rest. Every day we face new conspiracies and attacks, and now we're dealing with sanctions and a blockade. But it's not just us. The Cuban people have been fighting and winning for over 50 years, and they aren't going to give up.
The Bolivian Member of Parliament, Edith Mendoza, also spoke, condemning the actions of the United States government.
We will never be excluded or cheated, nor will be the back garden of the empire, because the empire doesn't give the orders in our countries. The government of the United States should give orders to its grandparents, because we won't allow them to do so here. And you have to respect Venezuela. Long live the unity of the people. Long live Bolivia. Long live the self-determination of the people. Long live Chavez. Long live Evo Morales.
Unknown assailants attempted to assassinate a social leader in the Cauca Valley department of Colombia just before protests against the murders of human rights defenders across the country on Friday. Carlos Alberto Tobar was shot 6 times at his home in Buenaventura. His family says he is in, quote, a delicate condition. The Green Alliance Senator Antonio Sanguino asked, quote, how many more deaths do we have to mourn before these events are investigated? Tobar had already solicited help from the government's National Protection Unit after receiving threats, but hadn't received a response. Protesters say there will be no peace in Colombia without the faithful implementation of the 2016 peace accords by the government of Ivan Duque. Figures released on Thursday show that 734 human rights defenders and community leaders have been killed since January 2016. Marches in solidarity were also held around the world.
We come with a complete system for truth, justice and compensation, calling for the lives of every Colombian to be respected, especially those Colombians who on their territories have given their lives for peace in their territory.
Guatemalan social movements have condemned the government led by Jimmy Morales for caving into pressure from the United States and agreeing to a safe third country migration agreement. The Trump administration had threatened tariffs on Guatemalan goods entering the United States if the Central American country didn't sign up to a plan for migrants to seek asylum in Guatemala rather than the U.S. In return, there will be more visas available for Guatemalans to work in the U.S. agricultural sector. The country's constitutional court previously said that the deal needed congressional approval.
I have faith that with the visit taking place today with the Interior Minister in Washington, we could have good news for Guatemala. This will put us in a privileged position, as a privileged partner for the United States. And as a privileged partner for the United States, I say this because the US is our main partner.
Now, the so-called safe third country migration strategy has come under heavy criticism, both in the U.S. and internationally. The Californian Democratic Congresswoman Norma Torres said that the idea that Guatemala would be a safe country is ridiculous. The Guatemalan government has chosen to defy the will of its people to curry favor with the Trump administration. In other news, illegal miners armed with machine guns have killed at least one member of the Indigenous Wahapi community in Brazil. The miners invaded Wahapi territory, forcing the entire community to flee to a neighboring village. The Wahapi then asked the Brazilian armed forces to respond urgently by sending a helicopter to the area. China has received the support of 50 ambassadors to the UN office at Geneva, or UNOC, for its position on issues related to its Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. In the joint letter to the UN Human Rights Council and the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the ambassadors commended China for its economic and social progress, effective counterterrorism and de-radicalization measures, and strong guarantees of human rights. The ambassadors also denounced the representation of Xinjiang by Western media when compared to visits they've made to the region.
Remember that China, the country was proud to sign this letter along some other delegations and send it to the High Commissioner. Let us remember that China lifted 800 million people out of poverty. Certainly there are some development problems in Xinjiang region, but authorities are fully aware of them, they are addressing them. Xinjiang is lying in the core of Belt and Road Initiative. People in Xinjiang want stability.
Personally, I was impressed because the news I heard about Xinjiang before I get there were totally different. So I saw a region which is well organized and the people are very kind.
After the break, we'll take a look at Rebellion Day celebrations in Cuba. Don't go away. Back. Opposition sectors in Argentina are condemning the government's plan to advance with the labor reforms to comply with the International Monetary Fund's demands.
As campaigns for the October 27th general elections continue in Argentina, the government, led by President Mauricio Macri, is trying to gain the support of productive sectors by jeopardizing one of the most vulnerable groups in the country, pensioners. Macri is working on a pension reform.
Pensioners are the ones that will be forced to fix the fiscal imbalance. The reform seeks to slow down the rate at which pensions increase. It also poses a threat to future pensioners. Retirees that are older than 65 will be getting 30% less benefits than they are getting now.
The debate intensified when legislators attempted to reform the collective labor agreements in order to change the retirement age from 65 to 70 for men and from 60 to 65 for women.
The proposed reform not only affects pensioners, but also those who are about to retire. As it stands, there will be a segment of children that will not get a job. Who's going to pay those future pensions? Besides, they are also plundering the pension fund to pay external debts. They can remove that money from the larger funds and leave retirees' funds untouched.
The IMF is demanding that the government proceed with the pension reform despite its consequences for the population. There have been lots of layoffs in the health sector, pensioners have no discounts on medicines, and in fact more than 200 medicines are no longer free.
Working people see this as something that will affect them in the distant future, but the truth is, government's transformations are being planned for after the elections. This will mean a regressive transformation of the system, which must be opposed. This means that everyone should gather to fight against these reforms.
The new reform that the government is seeking to implement proposes major cuts to the pension fund. They argue that the current pension system is no longer sustainable for the state.
Shifting gears now, communities in southern Peru are continuing their strike against the Tia Maria mining project. That's in spite of a promise by President Martin Vizcarra to review the permissions given to the mining company. On Thursday, trade unions in the capital, Lima, held a protest in solidarity with the people of the Tambo Valley in the Arequipa region, where the huge copper mine is to be built. The police used tear gas to try to disperse the demonstrators. Earlier, we were joined by Rafael Hotma, an expert in political ecology in Lima, Peru. He believes that protests against the Tia Maria mining project can't stop its progress.
Peru, we have about in between 10 and 15 mining projects that are paralyzed or stopped indefinitely due to protests, and Tia Maria is one of them. Already in two earlier protest cycles in 2011 and 2015, the plans to build and exploit the mine couldn't go through. I think in general, when there is such big opposition of local population, even in coordination with their chosen authorities, it's hard to move forward the project. And in general, it's a very controversial project. So I think, I think that it can be stopped by the protests.
Cuba celebrated one of the island's most important historic dates on July 25th, National Rebellion Day. The commemoration is held every year to mark the anniversary of the 1953 attack on the Moncada barracks led by Fidel Castro. The attack failed in its immediate objectives, but it marked the beginning of the struggle to overthrow the US-backed dictator Fulgencio Batista, which ended in the victory of the revolution in 1959. Thousands of Cuban citizens have taken to the Plaza de la Patria in the city of Bayamo to celebrate the event. The first secretary of the Communist Party of Cuba, Raúl Castro, and Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez, president of the Council of State, led the event.
The revolution needs us to fight in defense of the economy, for us to break the enemy's plans, to destroy us and to strangle us, for us to strengthen the people's morale, citizenship, decency, solidarity, discipline, and above all, public service, since that is the legacy of our founding fathers.
Now this year, the National Rebellion Day celebrations took place in the province of Granma. Let's take a look at the significance of this historic location.
The national flag, designed by independence fighter Carlos Manuel de Céspedes, was raised in the Revolution Square in Bayamo, some 700 kilometers away from Havana. These women, dressed like the Mambisas, who fought in La Manigua against the Spanish colonizers, are witnessing the ceremony commemorating the 26th of July.
The atmosphere for July 26 is huge. Cuba has made great strides, and we want to keep moving forward. We are not afraid of any blockade.
The spirit of rebellion has always accompanied the citizens of Bayamo. This was the first city taken by anti-colonial rebels. The national anthem was also written and sung here for the first time. In 1869, the city was burned to the ground by its own inhabitants who refused to let the enemy take it over. Another crucial event is the raid on the Carlos Manuel de Céspedes barracks on July 26, 1953, led by the then young leader Fidel Castro.
The raid was part of the continued fight started by Céspedes and was led by ideas of José Martín. As Fidel once said, Martín was an intellectual author of the revolution and chose Bayamo both for his fighting spirit and its geographical location. Here, they stopped the reinforcements from reaching Santiago de Cuba.
According to regional authorities, Granma was chosen as this year's host for the July 26 celebrations, not only for its history, but also for its economic performance, especially in farming, fishing, and food production.
Grama contributes more than 2 million liters of milk to state food programs. It has well-developed cattle farming, and it also contributes to other sectors of the agriculture.
This year's celebrations come in the context of a worsening U.S. blockade that has the purpose of creating discontent in the population and strangling the economy of the island. As part of the celebration of National Rebellion Day, the citizens of Grama assure that their traditions showcase the determination with which, regardless of Washington's interventionist actions, the people of Cuba will resist.
And still to come, Yellow Vest protests show no signs of relenting. Welcome back. Guyana has selected a new chairperson for its Elections Commission. The president approved retired Justice Claudette Singh for the role after receiving a second list of nominees from the opposition. He said Justice Singh meets the criteria for the appointment and satisfies the ruling of the Caribbean Court of Justice for a consensual appointment by both the president and the opposition. The CCJ upheld a no-confidence motion on the government on June 18th, which requires elections to be held by September 18th.
We're very, very happy with this development. The process was consensual. The names on the list enjoy my confidence, and they enjoy the confidence of the president. They were found not unacceptable to him, and therefore he chose from a list of 6 names that I submitted to him. And so there was no question of a unilateral appointment being done here. We believe that she will deliver fair elections, and that's all that the PPP wants from any chairperson of GECOM: fair and timely elections.
Venezuelans in Trinidad and Tobago began receiving registration cards on Friday. The card is valid for 6 months, and following its expiration, Venezuelan nationals will have to reapply. It is important to note that registered Venezuelans who need to leave and return to Trinidad and Tobago during the 1-year amnesty period will be required to apply for a Trinidad and Tobago visa. TNT offered Venezuelans amnesty, allowing them to work and receive medical care for 1 year starting May 31st. The following month, the government signed an order for Venezuelans to require a visa to travel to Trinidad. Barbados is relaxing its foreign exchange laws and will now allow residents to hold foreign currency accounts with a value of up to $10,000 from August 2nd. Minister in the Ministry of Finance Ryan Strawn said the funds deposited into these foreign currency accounts cannot be purchased from the local domestic access to foreign exchange. He added that the government is putting a framework in place to remove the 70% surrender value on those accounts. Personal travel allowances will also be increased from Barbados $7,500 to Barbados $20,000. A Sudanese probe team tasked with investigating the June 3rd deadly raid on a sit-in outside the Defense Ministry has revealed that some rogue military elements fired at demonstrators. Fath al-Rahman Saeed, the head of the investigating committee, said some members of the security forces opened fire at protesters, resulting in the death of around 87 people, a bigger number than previously announced officially.
It is clear to the committee that there was 2 unidentified masked people in the sit-in area firing bullets, as well as it turned out that there were 3 unknown persons firing bullets at the protesters from the top of Al-Bashir Medical Complex building.
Shifting gears now, the Democratic Republic of Congo has announced plans to carry out surveillance and vaccination training for citizens in order to tackle the Ebola virus. The program is aimed at strengthening the response to the Ebola outbreak over the next 6 months. This comes after the World Health Organization declared the virus an international health emergency. President Felix Tshisekedi is set to take over supervision of the Ebola response team after the resignation of the country's health minister. The disease has killed more than 1,700 people since August 2018.
What we want is to involve the population of Beni, of Mangina, and to follow the strategy we will implement there. So the first thing is to train young people and also young people of this region. So they will be in charge of vaccination, of surveillance.
Libya's Red Crescent movement has recovered more than 60 bodies from a beach a day after a boat carrying migrants capsized in the Mediterranean Sea. We warn our viewers that the video which you are about to see contains graphic images. According to authorities, the boat was carrying up to 350 people before it sank north of the coastal city of Coms. So far, only 130 people have been rescued. The victims include nationals from Eritrea, Egypt, Sudan, and Libya. This latest shipwreck brings the death toll of migrants in the Mediterranean to over 600 this year alone.
We were notified 48 hours ago about the boat carrying 350 migrants. 110 of them were alive. The number of bodies of the migrants is now 62. These bodies were recovered from the sea by the city of Coms.
Yellow vest demonstrators have taken to the streets for the 37th consecutive week, protesting against the neoliberal policies of the French President Emmanuel Macron. Security forces continue to repress the protesters, who are demanding an end to austerity politics, an increase in the basic pension, and greater investment in social programs. Militarized police have been using tear gas and rubber bullets in an attempt to disperse demonstrators.
We don't give up until the end. We still continue the fight, despite all the repression, despite all the mutilated, the wounded and the dead that there have been. Because the problem is that on the news, they don't tell the truth. That's the problem. There is a big difference between what happens in the field and on TV. There is too much repression, unfortunately. They want the movement to stop. We do not let go of the fight. We must not stop.
Thousands of Italians are protesting the government's decision to complete the construction of a controversial rail link connecting Lyon and Turin. Demonstrators marched towards the construction site on Saturday following Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte's comments that blocking the project would cost more than completing it. Police fired tear gas when protesters tried to force security blocks and reach the entrance to the site. The Five Star Movement has long opposed the project, arguing that Italy should focus on upgrading the existing transport network. Boris Johnson has been welcomed with protests in the north of England on his first visit as Prime Minister. The group, Remembering Disabled People Against the Cuts, pelted the new Prime Minister with softballs as he visited the city of Manchester. Johnson was in the north to make his first speech outside of Westminster. And that brings us to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.